Hi everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. On today's episode, I have the lovely Allie Mason. Now, you may remember I've had Allie on before. Actually, it was episode 23, which was a very long time ago. But if you didn't listen to that episode, here is a quick intro to Allie. So, Allie studied for an undergraduate degree in Christian Theology and has a master's degree in education research from the University of Oxford. Allie has always been an avid reader and now, as an adult, writes books that neurodivergent kids and teens, like she once was, can see themselves in. Her non-fiction debut, The Autistic Guide to Adventure, is due to be released by Jessica Kingsley Publishers in March 2023. So, Allie, would you like to say hello?
I have just been sat here quietly listening to all these lovely words. Hello, listeners. It is very nice to be back.
Yeah, so you were last on in episode 23, and we're now in the mid 60s of 21 and Sensory podcast episodes. So how have things been since episode 23? Like how is your life? Give us a
An update.
bit of background, yeah.
Yeah. Well, things are very different now from where I thought they would be when we last spoke. But then again, things are also very similar. So I guess I'll clarify that a little bit more. When we spoke, we were talking about kind of all the creative things that I was getting into at the time. And as any fellow creators out there will know, and I'm sure you are also the same, you start projects and then you get sidetracked and you start new projects and the old ones get left behind. Or you also grow as a creator, as an artist, as a writer, and you realise that what you were working on at the time is not where your passions now lie. So I think anybody who was with us for episode 23 will be listening to this episode and thinking, gosh, that's not what I was expecting. That's not where I thought she was going to be at this point. Um, but I have a new job now. So since we last spoke, I now, as a way to pay the bills, I am a talent coordinator, which is a very fancy word for a recruiter. And I work at an environmental consultancy, so helping them find new environmental consultants. And that's been really rewarding because I've really gone into that with a diversity and inclusion focus that I didn't necessarily have in previous job roles. So it's been really nice to introduce colleagues to the whole world of kind of like being neurodivergent and disability and all kinds of things that they hadn't necessarily encountered before. But outside of that, so when I'm not doing my day job, I am still writing. And as we know, I've finished my non-fiction debut, which is coming out next year, which I'm super excited about in March. And I am still writing since finishing that because the creative mind never rests.
That's good. At least because I feel like I've spoken to people who have written a book who are like, I never want to write again. So this is a good thing.
I definitely had that moment, don't get me wrong.
Okay, I understand. And so how did this book come about? Like, it'd be really interesting to talk about the kind of like the process behind kind of, I don't know, like pitching a book or being approached to make a book. Like how did it work for you?
Yeah, so I originally pitched a book that wasn't this book to the publishers that I now work with, and they very kindly turned me down and said, no, we're not interested in working with you on this one. And so that was a bit of a confidence hit, but also made me really think about why I wanted to write a nonfiction book and what I wanted to provide readers with, let's say, within that book. So then I sent a new proposal in. So this was a direct approach from me to the publishers, and said, what about this one? Would you like it if I wrote this one? And thankfully, they did like the second one. And so that is a lesson, if I ever heard one, in perseverance and not giving up at the first hurdle. And also a lesson in not pinning your your worth on external validation,
Mhm.
because I think it would have been very easy after my first proposal was rejected to think, well, I've not got it in me. I
Mhm.
can't be a
Yeah.
writer. They're not interested in my work, and thankfully it wasn't the case. It was just that particular idea that wasn't necessarily. Perhaps it just wasn't commercial enough.
Mhm.
I will never know. Um, but yeah, so I approached the publishers. I'm working with Jessica Kingsley, who work with quite a few authors in our kind of neurodivergent social media space.
Mhm.
And that is, as you mentioned in the introduction, the Autistic Guide to Adventure. And the reason really why I wanted to write this book and the reason why I proposed this book was because it's something I wish I'd had when I was a child. And it's been really, really lovely since the book has been kind of formally announced and we can start promoting it, that quite a few people have commented on various social media posts and said, oh, I wish I'd had this when I was a child. And I was,
Aw.
that's exactly what I'm going for.
That's nice. That's really lovely.
Exactly. So that was really, really, really lovely. But it is basically a long process to write a book, and I think a lot of readers don't necessarily, and you know, before I wrote a book, I didn't necessarily understand
Mhm.
the amount of behind the scenes work that goes into it. But for context, I proposed this book to Jessica Kingsley um, not last Christmas, but the Christmas before.
Whoa.
And exactly, and so then there is the process of them reviewing the proposal, deciding they want to take it on board. That took about 5 months until I got the go ahead and we sorted all the contracts out, etc., etc.
Mhm.
And then there is the process of writing the book, and that took me over a year. So I didn't finish writing the book until July of this year.
Okay.
Um, and then now, between July and March, we have the process of creating the book, of physically getting a book ready to be in people's hands in bookstores. So it's a hell of a lot of work, and I think, as I said, I for one definitely didn't appreciate that before I got in behind the scenes.
Mhm. And how did you were you working full time, like, as you were writing it? Like, how did you juggle just life in general with writing a book?
With limited success. I was working full time whilst writing the book. I started my new role as a talent coordinator in January of this year. So I was in my previous job for a bit, and then I've been in this job whilst finishing it up, and it was just weekends and evenings were spent writing. And I
Mhm.
think that's the point where a lot of authors can say, oh, I never want to write another book again, when you're kind of juggling it like that.
Yeah.
Because something that you love quickly becomes something that you don't want to do, because
Mhm.
it is a very, very draining process, and it is very, very difficult to force yourself to sit down and write if you're not feeling like writing. But when you have a deadline like this, you've not really got much of an option. So
Yeah.
that was a bit of a journey to go on.
Mhm. And I feel like you see, like, online a lot of authors being like, "Oh, I went away to write a book," kind of thing, and they write kind
Yes.
of on their own in a nice, like, I don't know, coastal area or something,
Yeah.
in a nice,
Yeah.
like, little cabin. And
Yeah.
as much as that looks great and would probably be a great way of writing a book, it's not really that feasible for, people writing their first book.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because that was something that I that I felt I had to do in order to be a proper author. And
Okay.
this feels very silly to say it out loud now, but at the time it really meant quite a lot to me. So last year, I took some annual leave from work, and I booked a little cabin in the countryside, and I
Ah.
went off to a little cabin for a week, and wrote, just spent all day writing, and then a bit of a wander around the countryside to get some fresh air and a break.
Mhm.
Um, and I tell you what, Emily, I actually left early. I
Oh,
actually
really?
left a day early and came home because I was like, I'm not enjoying this. And I think it was just the isolation. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my own space. I love having time on my own. I'm incredibly introverted, as most of us autistics tend to be.
Mhm.
But after a week of being locked up on my own with a book that I was starting to get
Yeah.
a little bit frustrated with, I think I just snapped and I was like, I'm just going to go home. I want to see my boyfriend. I want to see my dog.
Mhm.
Little things like I want somebody to make me a hot drink whilst I sit on the sofa under a blanket.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's really, really easy to fall into those kind of expectations of what being a real author looks like.
Yeah. That's so
Uh,
interesting that you tried it.
I did.
It sounds like you missed your, like, creature comfort kind of things, and yeah,
Absolutely.
I get
That
that.
sense of being looked after, I guess. I think it very much goes underappreciated, but it's one of the things that I mention in the acknowledgements of my book. I think Chris, my partner, is the first person I say thank you to, because without him, this book would never have happened.
Mhm.
Because he basically just took over looking after everything during those evenings and weekends when I was writing. You know, he cared for the dog, he looked after the house, he looked after me.
Mhm.
And so another thing when you're holding the book in your hands is to be aware that it's not a one person job.
Mhm.
There are a lot of people, and even people that you wouldn't necessarily expect, who are responsible for that book becoming an actual thing.
Mhm. And that's the thing as well, like, people just don't realise how much of a shared effort it is. Like, obviously, you're the named author, etc., you wrote the book, but there's so many other people, like, supporting you and
Yes.
holding things up for you at the same time, kind of thing. So it's nice that, you know, you can get that out in the acknowledgements and be like, thank you so much to all these people.
Definitely, it wouldn't have felt right not to include all of those people in there, because it is such a communal effort. And you're absolutely right that you have that one name on the front of the book, although we have Ella, my illustrator's name, on the front as well, which I'm really happy about, because sometimes in the publishing industry the illustrator can get looked over,
Mhm.
which I never wanted to be the case for us. So it's really nice to have that space to be able to celebrate the other people beyond just the author, me,
Yeah.
who got this book to where it is.
Mhm. And let's chat about Ella. So Ella has actually been on my podcast before, Ella Willis. But could you kind of explain how Ella brought your ideas to life and how they worked with you, etc.?
Absolutely. So it was really interesting actually, because I found Ella on Instagram. I was just browsing the hashtag autistic artist. I'm pretty sure that's where it all started. And I was looking for somebody whose style really matched the vision that I had for the book, because I was hoping for a very, I don't know if did you ever read Jacqueline Wilson when you were younger, Emily?
Yes, I know the
Yes.
style you mean. Is it? I think it's Nick
Exactly.
Sharratt, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nick Sharratt was just the vision that I had for this book.
Hmm.
But I also really wanted it to be an autistic illustrator. And when I came across Ella's work, the way that their style is very Nick Sharratt to me personally. That's how I saw it.
Hmm.
And so I just sent them a message on Instagram, and I was like, "Hello, um, would you consider illustrating a book?" A very,
Big
very
question.
big question for your opening gambit, but
Yeah.
I don't do small talk, so that's what we led with.
Hmm.
And Ella was very, very keen to get involved. We had a call, we talked about what the book was going to contain, what it was all about, what the expectations were going to be of the illustrator.
Hmm.
And they were just on board straight away, which was fantastic. Um, and I feel that the book now would just not be complete without those illustrations. Do you know what I mean? Like when you see
Hmm.
the finished product, because we've had the final proofs through where the pages are all mocked up the way that they will be printed with the illustrations on them.
Okay.
And it does just bring the book to life. And especially what I love is that I was quite hands off with the whole process. I gave Ella some direction, but I essentially left them to kind of let their imagination run wild. And what we've ended up with is a very, very diverse set of illustrations. So we've got wheelchair users, we've got amputees, we've got different races, different genders. I mean, even as simple as some people are wearing glasses. How
Yeah.
often do you
That's a
see
really good point.
people bother to illustrate kids with glasses? And as one of those kids myself, I appreciate that. So I was just so pleased with how everything turned out, and I'm really, really grateful that Ella was open to that very bold first message.
And I guess also, like you saying, it brings like the book to life. Like, do you want to kind of explain the kind of different activities? Because obviously, it's a lot of like, I think is it all outdoor activities? Am I right?
Yes, so the idea is that all of the activities can be done outdoors. Some of them can be done indoors as well, but my vision for the book was to help autistic kids and teenagers spend more time outdoors, because I think that can be a really inaccessible environment for us. And I know that for me growing up, it was a very inaccessible environment for me, and I didn't want it to be. So the kind of activities that we've got in there, we've got some very kind of like sport based activities. We've got things like archery and swimming, and we've even got triathlon in there for the really ambitious people. So we've got a good mix of kind of what you'd consider traditional sporting activities. And then we've also got some more creative activities. So we've got drawing, and we've got nature writing in there as well. And then we've got some more what I would consider kind of like relaxed outdoor activities. So
Okay.
things like stargazing or fossil hunting or beach combing.
Okay.
Um, because I just felt like I really wanted there to be something for everybody. I didn't want somebody to open the book and think, oh, well, I'm not really sporty, so
Yeah,
this wouldn't be
like
for me.
you don't want like loads of high intensity like
Exactly,
stuff. Yeah.
exactly. And also for people to have that opportunity to choose what feels right for them on the day. It might be the case that they're not feeling high intensity and they just want something a bit more chill, or it might be that they've got loads of energy and they need to get it out, and
Yeah.
we can do that.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I was having a look at the Jessica Kingsley website, and I saw like kind of in the summary of the book that you also mentioned like a summary of like the sensory experiences involved, which I
Yes.
thought was quite interesting. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Definitely. So there's 35 activities in total, and each of the activities follows the same kind of, I think Jessica Kingsley have described it as a fact sheet kind of format.
Okay.
But each activity starts with a brief introduction, which usually talks a little bit about the history of it, where it first came from.
Okay.
And then there is a section on the sensory expectations, as you've noted. So things like not just the obvious senses of sounds and smell and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but also um, the kind of body awareness,
Mhm.
and the kind of inner. I know it's called vestibular, but I can't remember how to describe it in non-scientific terms. But kind of
Yeah.
like the inner sensation of doing something, basically.
Yeah.
And so it was really important to me, because that's one of the things that I've personally struggled with, is if you don't know what something's going to feel like,
Mhm.
then you're a little bit wary of doing it.
Mhm.
So it's really good knowing what to expect, and also being able to say, well, I know that, for example, if something's going to be really loud, it's not going to be for me. And so I'm going to pick a different activity that doesn't have those kinds of sensory expectations.
Mhm.
So there's that section in there as well. Then we also have a section on getting started. So that's basically the taking it really back to square one. How do I get involved with this activity? Because the other thing is, and I've explained this to neurotypical and non-autistic people, is that saying, "Oh, I want to start archery," is all well and good, but if you don't know how to get from your front door to holding a bow and arrow in your
Yeah.
hands, then that is a barrier to accessing that sport. So spelling it out really simply was also a really important thing for us to include within the book. There's also a little section called Why Try It, which is basically just trying to sell each activity. So thinking of reasons why it's a positive thing to include in your lifestyle. And then what are we on now? So that's 4 sections. And then the 5th section is support recommendations. And this one is a really, really, it's really close to my heart in the sense that I think it is so important for young people to be able to advocate for themselves. And I definitely feel like my ability to access these kinds of activities and the outdoors and sports and what have you has improved significantly from me being able to explain what I struggle with and also to ask for specific things that will help me overcome those struggles. And you can't know what to ask for if you don't know what to ask for.
Yeah, exactly that.
Exactly. It sounds so obvious, but people don't necessarily consider it that if you've never, if you don't have a lot of autistic or neurodivergent people in your social circles, or you don't know many of them at school, or, if you're kind of isolated, you don't have that learning of, well, this worked for them, so maybe it would work for me. So I really wanted to provide that kind of collection of suggestions and recommendations of things that you can ask a coach for or ask a teacher for that are going to make it so much easier for you to get involved in that activity.
Wow. It sounds really like thorough as well, which I
Oh,
think is
yes,
exactly what autistic people want, is
precisely.
the ins and outs. And I think also it like mentions kind of like budgeting as well, and that's really good because I think also like I don't know about you, but like knowing when to like start something is one thing, but also like knowing when to like invest in like equipment for yourself rather than like using it at a club or something like
Yes,
that,
yes,
like not knowing when to do that sort of thing, and just the kind of more like social aspects as well is kind of terrifying, so it's good
definitely.
that you've kind of covered that as well.
Yeah, so we have at the top of every activity, Ella has illustrated some little coins, and we've basically done it so that one coin means that it is either free or low cost to get involved. So that might be something like drawing, once you've got your piece of paper and your pencil, you're good to go. Then 2 coins means that there's a little bit of upfront investment, or actually, my example is going to be cycling, so that is quite a significant upfront investment.
Yeah.
But once you have that piece of kit, you don't necessarily have to keep paying out regularly. Whereas something like sailing, which is also in the book, that is going to be a 3 coin activity because you are always going to be spending money on the lessons and the,
Yeah.
as you said, the gear and the kit and things like that. Very few people are going to be able to afford to buy their own sailing boat, so it's
Yeah.
something that you do have to prepare to invest in over a long period of time.
It's good that you've kind of like covered that as well, because you can, it's almost like these sorts of activities can become like a special interest and people can like massively research into them, but you
Yes.
don't always realize the costs like associated with it, so it's kind of good that you and Ella kind of start the page with that. Like, just so you know, this
Yeah,
could be like
absolutely,
more
absolutely.
costly.
Exactly, and that is so relevant as well to kind of my own experience, because one of the things that I mention in the book is that when I was younger, one of my special interests was horses and horse riding.
Mhm.
And I come from a low income background, so my parents could never afford to send me to horse riding lessons. I did fortunately have a few opportunities over the course of my childhood where I did manage to get on a horse and to
Mhm.
experience some riding or spend time with horses in the stables and whatnot. But having regular horse riding lessons was never an option for me because it was just too far out of our financial capabilities. So you do then find different ways to explore those special interests that aren't necessarily the most obvious ones
Yeah.
when you find yourselves in those kind of limiting situations.
Mhm. And that's kind of interesting in itself, in that, you know, you can be interested in something and not have access kind of to
Yes,
it, sort of thing. Like,
definitely.
you can kind of, I don't know, really immerse yourself in, I feel like the likes of YouTube and stuff like that are so great for, like, I don't know, people who do just like pony trekking videos where you can, like,
Yes.
kind of feel like you're riding with them and stuff. Like, there's ways to, like, indulge in it even if you can't kind of like afford it.
Absolutely. And I would really encourage that, as long as you're not kind of getting yourself into that downward spiral of, oh, I
Yeah.
feel so upset that I can't do what everyone else is doing. If you can find ways to explore that, I was a big reader as a child, as we know from episode 23. And I loved any kind of pony club based books because it
Mhm.
is, as you say, like being there with them and doing the activity. And also, you kind of read about the more realistic side of it, how dirty and smelly and that
Yeah,
kind
and
of
like the
thing.
mucking out that is constant.
Yes, every single day, cleaning poop duty.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes you can enjoy it from a distance.
Indeed. And I was going to ask you as well that you've interviewed some like autistic athletes as well for the
Yes.
book. Can you explain that? I feel like we might have had a chat about it before, maybe just me and you, about like
Yes,
the different
possibly.
like athletes you were talking to. But yeah, it'd be great to share that, because I think it's really, really interesting that you've spoken to, people who are doing this more professionally.
Yeah, definitely. So I knew from the start that I couldn't just have me waffling on in this book because whilst getting outdoors and being adventurous and doing that kind of stuff is very much a special interest for me and something that I love learning more about and sharing with other people, I am just coming from my own perspective.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to share other perspectives of people who have different relationships with these different activities that we include in the book. And so we've got a variety of people from professional athletes to hobbyists who
Mhm.
are doing the different activities and who share their perspectives on how they first got started, how they feel being autistic has affected their experience, what they would recommend for anybody who's autistic and looking to start that activity. What's really nice as well is that we've been able to gather people from all over the world, and I was quite limited by who I could contact and find online. And I think
Mhm.
one of the things that I would have loved for the book to have, but it doesn't, is a bit more geographical diversity in terms of the different people that we were able to profile.
Mhm.
But we've got people from the UK, we've got people from the US, from New Zealand. So that was really exciting to be able to bring in those different perspectives and a range of ages as well. I think that um, Mimi, who is a horse rider from New Zealand, she's in her, I want to say early teens herself, so she's kind of like the key readership for the book, but she is
Mhm.
also one of the athletes that we've profiled. So that's really exciting. I think I am going to find out that she's significantly younger than that, but that's just off the top of my head.
That's nice though, that like people will be able to read it and kind of see their own kind of age group, or like you said, like a bit older. So for example, I don't know if parents are reading it to their kids kind of thing. Like they might be able to see themselves reflected in it a bit as well, which is quite nice.
Definitely, and also to see where the involvement in that activity can take you, because if you're looking at somebody who's kind of in their late teens, early 20s, which I think is probably the majority of the people that I've profiled, it just goes to show that autistic adults exist. And I laugh because
Yes.
that is such an ongoing conversation within our community, isn't it? About making sure that autistic adults are visible so that autistic kids can see them and know that their lives don't stop at 18.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's really important. And that also, you know, that you have like this like support right up until you're 18, and then that kind of, you know, stops. And
Yes,
or like you kind of have to like change services to like adult services, and a lot of that doesn't really exist for autistic people. A lot of stuff does kind of stop at 18, but it
yeah.
doesn't mean that your experiences or, you know, education should stop at 18.
Exactly. And I think that's why it's really important to show kids from the outset that there are these communities of autistic adults who all speak with one another and share their stories and support one another. Because if we can't get that support from formal avenues, let's say, then the I would say the next best place, but arguably probably the best place, full stop, is to get it from other people who are experiencing similar things to you.
No, exactly. And coming back to like all the different activities that you have in your book, this is a big question, but do you have a favourite one?
Oh my goodness, Emily.
It's a big question, I know, and it may change daily. I appreciate that, but
Yes, yes.
is there one that you love to do maybe, or there's one that has like a really nice illustration with it, or you
Oh,
know,
I
that
know,
sort of thing?
I know. Okay. I think that people are going to expect me to say roller skating.
That was in
Um,
my mind. Go on.
yes. Because as listeners may or may not know, I am a keen roller skater myself, and I am actually the quote unquote athlete profiled for that section. Uh,
Amazing.
yes, it made me feel quite good about myself. I'm in very good company here.
Mhm,
Um, but I think that would be a cop out answer. So we're gonna take that out of the running so that we can have a more interesting answer.
mhm,
Um, I think one of the activities that I really love to do, that we've included in the book, is stargazing.
mhm,
And stargazing you can do in a number of different ways, and some people really like to take it the more kind of, I don't know whether to describe it as the academic route or the scientific route, but in terms of like identifying the different stars and the constellations and things like that,
mhm,
which I have absolutely no problem with if that's what you love doing. I've included a bit of how to do that in the book. But for me, when it's pitch black outside and all you can see is the stars in the sky, I love to just look up and watch them. And I've written this in the book, and I think it's one of my favourite paragraphs, to be perfectly honest. But I love to think about how small I am in
yes.
comparison to the rest of the universe. And that
Mhm,
sounds like it's going to be a very negative thing, but actually, it just reminds you what's important.
mhm,
And things like what other people think about you, or the fact that you tripped over earlier and somebody saw you almost fall flat on your face when there was nothing there to trip over.
yes.
Um, they pale into insignificance when you are looking at the stars in the sky. And so
Mhm,
I find it a very grounding activity, and it has a very special place in my heart, because I know that if I am ever feeling overwhelmed or frustrated or self-conscious or anything like that, on a dark night I can just go and look at the stars and think, right, get it
mhm.
together.
And that's the thing, like it gives you that perspective, I think. Like you
Yes,
just realize how much else is going on out there, and like you said, like really in the grand scheme of things, as humans we're pretty insignificant compared to, you
yes.
know, what's going on out there in space. So I think that kind of like you said, like it's quite a grounding exercise, which I think is, you know, a lot of people are looking for that kind of
Yes.
like nowadays, like just stuff to kind of, ground you and just kind of help you reset. And I think stargazing is a really nice activity for that.
100%. And I think it's really important as well because for those of us who are autistic or neurodivergent or different from the norm in any perceivable way, we can
Mhm.
often feel like outcasts, we can feel isolated, we can have experiences with wider society where we haven't fitted in, we haven't felt like we've fitted in, and
Mhm.
that's had a negative impact on us, our well-being, our perception of ourselves. But the stars don't care. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, you go outside and you look at the stars, and everybody looks at the same stars, and the stars aren't judging you. And it sounds a little bit wishy-washy, up in the air and woo-woo, but when you really think about it, they've been there longer than us, and they will be there longer than us.
Mhm.
So surely, if they had an opinion, that would be the one that mattered.
Yeah, and I remember, this is like a really random, but I remember in lockdown, like saying to someone, like, are you looking at the moon at the moment? Because it looks like amazing, and realizing that like you can both be looking at the same moon and you can
Yes.
kind of share that. It doesn't matter where you are,
Yeah.
like as long as you're in the same time zone, obviously.
Yes.
But like you're looking at the same thing in the sky, and that's pretty
Absolutely.
amazing. And that's like a nice experience to share. Like obviously in lockdown when you couldn't be together, that actually something could bring you together in the sky. Like that's pretty amazing. And
Definitely.
like you're saying about the stars as well, like we share them.
Yep, they are there for everybody.
I just think that's quite, I don't know, there's something quite nice about that.
It's very magical, but it's very
mm,
magical in a very special way.
exactly. And just wanted to mention the rollerblading again. I know that that's kind of one of your like favorite activities. Did I see somewhere that you were training for a marathon on rollerblades,
Oh
or have
yeah.
I made that up?
It would be amazing if you had made that up. That would be quite the imagination. But it was true. I did. So it's a very interesting journey that I went on for this marathon. So it was during lockdown when I picked up roller skating again because I was like, this is something that I loved as a child. Why have I not done it since? And you
Mhm.
suddenly have all this opportunity for reflection, and you realize that there's nothing stopping you because you're an adult now and you earn your own money and you can spend that money on roller skates.
Hell yeah.
So I bought myself my first pair of grown up roller skates during lockdown.
Mhm.
But I went for those really fancy ones, the ones that you see on Instagram feeds and stuff where they're pretty colours and they've got little block heels and it's all very 80s disco
Kind
kind
of
of
like
situation.
pastel sort of color.
Yes,
Yeah.
they were beautiful. I still have them. They're in the garage now. They're beautiful kind of turquoise and pink pastel
Mhm.
colorway. Not very practical, however, for that. Do you know what I mean? They're more of like performance roller skates
Right.
than any kind of long distance skating. And on a whim, I did sign up to roller skate the Berlin Marathon.
Oh my word.
I know, what a whim. I shall not be doing that again. If I do it again, I shall be doing it with serious thought and consideration.
I see.
Um, but yeah, so I signed up for this marathon and then I was like, gosh, well, I'm going to have to train for it now.
Mhm.
And I realised very quickly that these fancy 80s disco roller skates were not going to be particularly supportive over, gosh, how many miles is it? 26 miles.
I was going to ask. I was like, how long is a marathon again?
It
Wow.
is very long. It is
Yeah.
very long. And so I got myself another pair of roller skates. These were more kind of sporty, designed for these long distances,
Mhm.
and started training on those. But in the UK, roller skating is not particularly popular. There's not a lot of places that you can roller skate or kind of training areas for you to roller skate. So I
Mhm.
was literally training in the local industrial estate car park.
Amazing.
Um, yes, I. was there at the, like, I would love to say the crack of dawn because that makes me sound really dedicated, but I was there by 6 a.m., so I would consider that
Oh,
pretty
yeah, that's pretty early.
impressive. Because it takes a while to roller skate that kind of distance. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd be by the kind of in the lead up to the marathon, because the marathon was in September. I was training every week, sometimes twice a week, and getting up early enough to avoid all the cars within the industrial estate car park. And my
Mhm.
favourite thing was that the Greggs there opened at 6:30. So I would have all of these like burly van drivers rocking up and seeing me just racing around this car park and being like, she's a loony. She's crazy. Um,
Amazing.
but every single week I'd be there to welcome them on their Friday morning for their Greg's pasty. Um, but I did, Emily, I have to be honest, I did kind of sabotage myself unintentionally.
Oh, no.
I know it's a very sad story, but because I didn't really have a coach, so there was a roller skating team in Birmingham that I got in touch with and that I trained with occasionally, but I didn't see them regularly.
Mhm.
So I was kind of just organising my own training and building up distance based on what I thought I should be doing rather
Mhm.
than professional input or anything like that. Um, and I was every single week going the same direction around this car park for these incredibly long distances.
Mhm.
Um, and I gave myself a sports injury. So I gave myself an ankle and a knee injury because I was turning on the
No.
same leg every single time.
Oh.
Um, so I got to marathon day, I got to the starting line, and I got 5 kilometers in.
Oh.
And then I had to stop because I was
No.
in so much pain.
Oh. Oh, well, it's not
Oh,
worth
no.
making it worse, is it? Like,
I think it's frustrating because it's something that I could have corrected if I'd known during my training what I
yeah,
was
but you
doing.
didn't. Yeah.
But I didn't. So unfortunately, that didn't work out. I have not roller skated a marathon, but I'm not ruling out trying again now that
Mhm.
I've learnt. Um, but I've had to leave the skates for the last couple of months because the marathon was in September.
Mhm.
And I haven't picked up my skates since because I've just been trying to heal heal
Yeah.
this self-inflicted injury.
Is that gonna be a bit more of a, like, New Year's thing, do you think? You might try and get
I hope so,
back into
yes.
it?
I think it is going to be a case of just making sure that I balance my turns now. So make sure that
Mhm.
sometimes I go clockwise, sometimes I go anti-clockwise. Also making sure that I have the right supports,
Mhm.
because you can get like as much as you probably often see runners on the streets, they'll have like supports on their knees or they'll have their ankles
Yeah.
strapped up. You can get those for roller skating too. So
Okay.
hopefully when I get back to it, I'll be a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
And if I'm not too busy, which is very unlikely, then I might try and train again. But I think this is the other issue, is that I was training for this marathon whilst I had a full-time job, whilst I
Yeah.
was writing my book.
Yeah. That's a
So
lot.
yeah, that was a classic perfectionist overachiever.
I see that now, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. At the time, I was just like, of course, I've got enough time to do all of
Yeah.
this. And then with reflection, you think, what were you thinking?
Mhm. And, even just you saying, like, I'd have no idea that you have to balance the way that you're going and what you're turning on. Like, it makes sense, but you don't realize it until it's,
Until it
like you said, a
happens.
thing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It is very
Oh,
much a get. And I think this like really nicely circles back to the point of having the book because you can't know something that
no.
nobody's ever told you.
No, exactly. That's exactly it. And hopefully this will, like, provide some guidance, like, as you're starting out, and that
Yes.
hopefully, you can prevent injuries early on.
Exactly. So if anybody's listening who would like to take up roller skating, do not go around the corners the same way every single time. It's very painful. I wouldn't
Oh.
advise it.
Excellent. Um, one last thing I was going to ask you before we need to promote the hell out of where to buy your book and
Of
where to
course.
find you online, is how is your dog?
Yes.
How is Lena?
She is really well, thank you. It was actually her second birthday on Wednesday,
Ah, I
which
remember
is
when you
mad.
got her and she was so
Exactly.
small.
I feel like when we first started talking in the last episode, I'd probably only just got her, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
So you can tell, dear listeners, how long ago that was now. But yeah, she's doing really well, and she's actually a very keen runner.
Oh,
So she, for those who don't know, Lena is a Labrador, but she's also a working Labrador. So her parents were from a working lineage, as opposed to domestic Labradors, which are the more kind of chunky, wide set ones. She runs like a whippet. She is so fast.
oh,
So I think my next kind of active pursuit or hobby that I'm going to go after is to learn how to run so that I can go running with her, because she loves it so much and it brings her so much joy, and
oh.
I'd like to provide that for her. So the roller skating might have to wait whilst I figure out how to run a 5K.
I feel like if I was to try and do that with my dog, like my dog's a beagle and he just stops constantly to smell. Like it sounds like you
Yeah.
have the right breed who is keen to run and just wouldn't stop every 20 seconds. Like
Oh, I know. I
you have to
know.
have the right dog for running
You
with the dog.
really do. You really do. And beagles, they're just made for other things.
Oh, they're just sniffer dogs and just so food orientated, like it'd be a nightmare. But I see people going running with like straps around their middle with their dogs on them so they don't have to hold the lead and stuff. And I think
Yes,
that's clever as long as you don't have a dog that will like pull you over.
exactly. So we've actually hilariously last Christmas, because my boyfriend, he is a runner already. He likes to run.
Okay.
He sometimes takes the dog with him too, but he prefers to run without her, which is why I'm trying to learn with her so that I don't know any different, so that I can't decide that I prefer running without her anyway.
Okay.
Um, but last Christmas, he asked three separate people for one of those around the waist leads,
Oh, really?
and didn't think about the fact that what he would do if they all bought him one, and they did. So we have three of those in the house, and we can choose based on
Oh,
colour and design how we're feeling that day and which one we're going to put on.
amazing. You have a selection.
Exactly, exactly. So it's becoming as much a fashion show as it is
Yeah.
exercise over here.
hmm And are you someone who has lots of like collars for her as well? Are you someone that,
Oh, so we would be, but we're trying to rein it in. So
yeah.
we do have a lovely selection of collars, and recently we went on holiday, and it was the first time we went on holiday without Lena. And we brought her a new collar back as a way of
Oh,
saying sorry for leaving you behind.
oh,
So she has a lovely new collar which we gave to her for her birthday this week, which has pine trees and bears and kind of like very
oh.
outdoorsy, mountainous kind of vibe to it. So
She's on brand.
this is exactly what I was thinking, Emily. I was like, I didn't do this on purpose, but she is now like perfect and ready for her photo shoot with the book, because
Oh,
what better
please.
way to promote the book than to have a cute dog in the background?
Yeah, I think encourage other people to get that going as well. Like, I would like to see
Start a
pets
hashtag.
with your book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pets with
why
my
not?
book. Okay, well, Emily's going to start it, you guys, and then we'll join
I
in
will
afterwards.
get my beagle involved, don't worry. um, I can't believe I always do this. I can't believe we've been talking for almost an hour.
I
It's gone
know.
so quickly. Um, we have to say where are you online? Where can people pre-order your book? Because obviously it's out next March, so it's on pre-order right now, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I actually now have my own website, which is very
Ooh.
exciting. So you can go to www.allywrote.com.
Mhm.
I'll spell that out. That's ALLIEWROTE. And that's where I kind of host all of the information about the various things that I've done online, and you can access them all
Mhm.
there. And then I'm under the same name on Instagram, so that's Ali Wrote on Instagram. And in terms of pre-ordering the book, which is a very, very helpful thing to do because it tells the distributors, the bookstores, the publishers that this is a conversation worth having, accessibility in the outdoors, and that's what we want to encourage.
Mhm.
You can pre-order it from all good bookstores in the UK.
Mhm.
So Waterstones, WH Smith, you can even get it from Amazon. So they're all great places. And if you're not in the UK, you can order that from a book depository and they deliver worldwide.
Amazing. I will pop all those links in the show notes in case anyone wants to just like click on them more easily than having to type them out. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. It was lovely to like check back in with you again. And yeah, please go pre-order Allie's book, which is the Autistic Guide to Adventure. So yeah.
Thank you for having me. It has been lovely. And I'm sure when we get to about episode 100, you'll find me here again, listeners.
And we'll have another check-in and be like, how's your life now?
Exactly. What have you not done and what have you stuck with?
No. Look, you've got a book. This is big.
It's good. It's good
Yeah.
stuff. Need to be proud of myself.
Exactly. Well, thank you again.
No worries. Have a good day.